Our next presenter is known as the Queen of the Mods. Please welcome to the stage the wonderful Dinah Lee.
Thank you. Hi everybody, great to be here. And I'd like to honour Ray Columbus and the Invaders. You know, I first met Ray in 1959, 1960, and he was performing at a teen dance at the Caledonian Hall in Kilmore Street, Christchurch. The look and the dress of the time was classic 50s. And Ray, I mean, he was quite a dapper dresser, and even then, he had a demeanour about him. He knew who he was and where he was going. In 1961, Ray and I met again to appear weekly in the first Christchurch-produced TV show, Time Out for Talent. And we performed a duet together, closing the show with a different rendition of the song, The Party's Over. It was early 60s, Ray moved to Auckland. And Auckland in those days was the mecca of show business in New Zealand. And with the dance clubs, TV shows, and of course the opportunity to record. Talent from Christchurch always made an impact on the Auckland scene. The boys made an immediate impact recording for Zodiac Records, Eldred Stebbings Recording Studio in Herne Bay. Ray Columbus and the Invaders phenomenon really took off with the release of She's a Mod, soaring to #1 on the New Zealand and Australian charts. In fact, She's a Mod knocked the Beatles from their #1 position on the Australian charts. And appearing on every teenage TV show with his unique dance steps, the Mod's Nod, Ray and the Invaders created hysteria with all their fans. They were stars. The Invaders looked different, holding their Fender Stratocasters high to the chest, really trend-setting that look. They broke the mould and became part of the music revolution of the 60s. Ray Columbus and the Invaders were the best. To get to #1, you had to be the best. In 2002, I was on the same bill as Ray and the Invaders on the hugely successful arena tour of Australia, Long Way to the Top. And the criteria for all performers who appeared on the show, they had to have a national #1 hit record. Ray and I also performed a duet together for the official opening ceremony of the Avecta Arena in April 2007. And it is such a pleasure to be here to honour Ray, Dave and Billy. I would also like to acknowledge Wally Scott guitar and Jimmy Hill drums, whom I knew right from the beginning of the Invaders' rise to stardom. Sadly, Wally and Jimmy are no longer with us. The one thing that really stands out for me is not just the talent of Ray Columbus and the Invaders that has stood the test of time, but their total class.
The New Zealand Herald Legacy Award. The 60s are universally known as the decade that defined the arrival of pop music, and there was no more definitive arrival of the pop phenomenon in this country than the mod madness brought on by Ray Columbus and the Invaders in 1964. They formed in Christchurch at the tail end of the 1950s, inspired by the gritty blues and R&B he heard on the jukebox at a bar for American servicemen. Young Ray Columbus had soon pulled together a hot band of like-minded locals to recreate that sound live. The Americans also provided the instruments. They were the first band in the country to have matching Fender guitars and amps. When Howard Morrison, touring the country at the time, told them that Auckland was the place to be, the kids from Christchurch headed north in 1962. Expecting to be blown away by Auckland bands, Ray Columbus and the Invaders instead found themselves the leaders of the pack. With their attention to detail and groovy styling down to matching pink fenders, dance moves, drain pipes and R&B pop, they were sensations and were soon packing out nightclubs all over town, with Columbus already the consummate hyperactive frontman. The band headed into the studio, and with just their second vinyl single release, Kapow, they were not only making waves in Auckland, but getting enough interest in Australia to convince themselves that they should try their luck over the Tasman. And so by 1963, Ray and the Invaders were headed to Sydney where, with the energetic Ray Columbus out front, Dave Russell and Wally Scott on guitars, the legendary Billy Christian playing bass and Jimmy Hill manning the drum kit, the definitive lineup of the band was settled. At the 2,000 capacity venue Surf City, the Bondi youth all hopped around doing the surf stomp. So Ray, a former champion tap dancer whose life had changed when he heard Elvis, decided to teach the kids his own mod nod, where the dancers' feet mostly stayed in place, but the torso swayed and the head never stopped shaking. After hearing the band's next single, I Wanna Be Your Man, and seeing Ray do the mod nod, the Beatles' Australian music publisher offered the group an unreleased song. She's a Mod was recorded for Zodiac in Eldred Stebbings' Rumpus Room in Herne Bay in May of '64. They rocked it up with a harder guitar sound and added the exuberant yeah, 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 yeahs that really made the song. In October of that year, the Invaders played She's a Mod at a concert broadcast on radio around Sydney, and the venue became a screaming swamp. To get out of the theatre that day, they had to run the streets to a nearby pub to escape the young girls. It made the papers and everyone in town was soon playing She's a Mod. Australia went mod mad, sending the song to #1 for 8 weeks. The Modvasion was underway and Ray Columbus and the Invaders were the first New Zealand act to ever top the Australian charts. Back home, the whole country woke up to the band. Ray Columbus and the Invaders created our own version of Beatlemania. 5 headline tours of New Zealand, 3 of Australia, and 52 gigs on the road with the Rolling Stones and Roy Orbison.
Till we kissed.
The same year, Ray Columbus and the Invaders won the very first New Zealand Music Award, then the Loxine Golden Disc Award, for Till We Kissed, a single which sold more than 50,000 copies in New Zealand.
I had tasted, but now I see I was waiting for you to.
They encapsulated the joy, dizziness and sheer optimism of being a teenager in those times. By the time they split, they'd recorded 2 albums and topped the charts. But most importantly, Ray Columbus and the Invaders had given New Zealand teenagers a taste of what the 60s was all about. Rian's is proud to present the 2009 New Zealand Herald Legacy Award to Ray Columbus and the Invaders. And Rian's and APRA are honoured to welcome them into the New Zealand Music Hall of Fame.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ray, Dave and Billy, Ray Columbus and the Invaders.
Kisses I had tasted, but now I see I was waiting for you to come back. I was waiting, girl. Won't you please tell me why this took so long to be here? Darling, where have you been all my life?
What a fantastic night of music. There was nothing like that in our day. We were about it.
Go on, Dave.
No, you go now. No, we're right.
We are so overwhelmed. You've pleased some old modsters incredibly the last few weeks. And I know you wanted to talk about Wally and Jimmy Bill. It's already been mentioned, and we accept this for them. Thanks very much from the New Zealand Herald, and also Rians for making us old rockers really and modsters relive some dreams again. And you can really live your dreams and do it. We've done it. It can be done. And we are so blessed. Thank you very much. And thanks to our record company, Stepping Zodiac, because they did it with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Now my grandkids are going to believe that I was a pop star.
He's actually on a CD.
Thank you.
As my old friend Sir Howard would have said, cheer. God bless you, Howie.